Welcome, welcome. We have another episode of The Weird Way coming at you. I'm jumping on for one of my favorite things, and you know what that means. If you've been listening for a while, you know I'm about to go for a solo cast and have some fun today. So I've been questioning a lot of things this week, the last couple weeks. If you weren't watching, we facilitated a group called the Gathering of Men, where we had 150 men come together and spend 4 days out in nature. And this was one of the most beautiful, beautiful experiences of my life. And we had men from all ages. The youngest was from 13 all the way up to 64. And it was something special. And for me, this has been a dream come into reality for the longest time. Ever since I learned about men's work and looking at the likes of Sacred Sons, I had been thinking of this. And why I want to jam on this today is to speak about what got me there and the choices along the way, because I want to iterate this, and I've been jamming on this for the last little while, but I had to go through so many shifts to actually get to that place where I could show up that weekend and facilitate and be a part of a team that was leading 150 men together. And there was moments where I wasn't sure I wanted to be here. And I just put out an email today. If you're not a part of that, go join the email list. And now it's something where I share a lot more personally. And in some longer form rather than Instagram and Facebook. So if you're not a part of that, join that. There's some great content there. And what I noticed is this experience of the psychospiritual death and the desire for that from the egoic structure of the mind. So though the ego resists death, there is a longing within a person to meet death and actually know death. And what I mean by this is, if we look at a lot of ancient tribes or tribes that have lineage, that have rituals, that have rites of passage for, say, young men turning into true men, what would happen is they would go through a psychospiritual death. And I'm sharing this because there was moments in my life where I felt I had to die or I wanted to die, but I didn't understand why. And for me, I thought it meant I wanted to end my life and leave this world for good. And when I reflect back, and what I realize is this was not true. What I was actually seeking was the psychospiritual death. And I see a lot of people get stuck here, especially when we're in the depressive periods of our lives. And that for me was when I felt most lost. It was when I was disconnected from myself, and I was crying, I was breaking down, wondering, what is the meaning of this? Where do I go in this world? How can I create something? Is there any purpose to any of this? And I really questioned this for the longest time. And this put me in what I consider a dark night of the soul, where I questioned, I didn't see the joy in life. I didn't know what the point was. And if you're not familiar with the dark night of the soul, it's just a period of time which can go on for months, for years, depending on who you are and what you're going through during a spiritual awakening, where it's like, I don't know if there's more, and it can be very dark. It can be like when we lose our own light, when we lose faith, when we lose that this is serving us. And these periods for me are a purification. And so for me in that time, I went through that period where I was like, I don't want to be here. I don't know what to do. And I've shared this before, like that was the period where I prayed to the moon and eventually got my first coach. And this allowed me to have a mentor to guide me through that psychospiritual death. And this is what it was. And this for me is why it's so important to have a mentor or someone who is familiar with this work to guide us through these processes, because for me, it allowed me to open and crack and go within to meet myself. So if you're familiar with the hero's journey, like a simple framework for that. There's a deeper model, like this is the work of Joseph Campbell and so many others who really spoke to this, especially in the mythopoetic movement. But we would talk about the 3 stages of the hero's journey. Generally there's 12, but I'm not going to break them down here. And the first stage was the call to action. So a call to change, a call for something more. And this is generally can be marked from 2 different places. Firstly, the first place is from a place of pain. And this is where it was for me. I was in that depressive state, and that wasn't bad. And this is what will go against a lot of what modern society would say, is that depression isn't bad. It's actually a sign that our souls are in pain, and it's asking us to change. It's saying, hey, something isn't right here. I want something different, and I'm not enjoying what I'm currently experiencing. And a lot of people are like, I'm depressed. It's bad. It's the end of the world. I'm going to stay like this only if you don't change. And this is what I see as a lot of the problems with the mainstream health institute, is that they don't consider the deeper meanings of depression. It's not actually depression that is the problem. It's that we're living in a time where we aren't connected to soul and ourselves. Because if that person was to tune in to, if they are living the life that they desire, I guarantee that nearly everyone would say no. And why this is important, if we take it back to the psychospiritual death, the person is going through a depression, a dark night of the soul, and they're descending into the dark. And in the darkness, a lot of the lines blur around what a person believes about the world, and it allows a deconstruction to occur, depression. It depressurizes them from the conditions and the beliefs and the ways of being that they have been told to believe. And this depression is actually a stripping back of these layers so they can reveal their light and come back to themselves. So in ancient times, when there was tribe, when there was rites of initiation, as a person would transgress and go through a transition, they would have an experience where elders, where mentors would come and guide them into this hero's journey. So the second part after a call to action is the underworld. It's the challenge. It's the going into the dark. There's many different names for it, but this is a period that they would be guided into. And what this did was allow them to, maybe not willingly, but guidedly enter into this darkness. And this is what is calling to a lot of people, because people are seeking these initiations, or better yet, maybe not the people are seeking it, but their soul is, because their soul on some level knows, hey, this isn't what I'm meant to be doing. I'm meant for more. I'm meant to be going after something that feels true for me, and I don't believe I'm capable of. So I feel stuck in a box and I don't know how to let go. I don't know how to break free from this box. So the pressure continues to build until they build to this point of depression, where the pressure can finally be released and it allows them to go free outside of the box and the constraints that they've been conditioned to believe. And this is the purpose of depression on a soul level. It's to decondition. It's to remove the things that aren't true. And so in the darkness, a person is actually able to reveal who they are. And this is what happens in this, is the ego begins to die. It begins to realize everything it thought about itself is no longer true. No longer are they the same person that entered the dark. No longer are the beliefs they had the same. No longer how they view the world is same. No longer how they view themselves are the same. And this creates a massive shift within the individual that allows them to go through a deeper period of change. And when they come out of that, they are a changed person. And then we have the third stage of the hero's journey, which is a return, which is all about coming back into the community as a changed person. But see, in that underworld journey, what happened was a psychospiritual death. This allowed a new iteration of the person to be born. So there was a death and a rebirth cycle within the hero's journey that conditioned who they were and allowed a more expansive version of them to take shape and form. This is the same as a caterpillar and what it does. It goes through several layers of molten, and a lot of people don't know this. Most caterpillars actually molt several layers before they go into the cocoon. And it's these layers where they're shedding skin, being like, oh, I've got to shed that to grow into something bigger, to finally become the caterpillar that then can become a butterfly by going into a cocoon and completely dissolving. And in each layer of that, there will often be an experience that feels like a dark night or a period of change where the reality is questioned. And this is something that is so important, because without this question and without this exploration of, oh, who am I? What's possible? A person will stay as they are, and eventually they will move towards death. The opposite of life is entropy, which is a movement towards death. So growth and expansion are factors of life. Life wants to grow, it wants to expand, and when we're not in that, we're actually moving towards death, which actually can be okay, because if we consider the likes of a black hole, and this is where the hustle culture and stuff like that can go amiss, is they're all about the expansion and growth. And I'm going to go on a tangent here. The only thing that goes for growth and expansion beyond anything else is actually a cancer cell, and it needs to consider, more than itself. So growth and expansion are a factor of life, but not the only factor, because we do need death. And the other part of this is the entropy, which is going within. So if we look at a black hole, it draws matter into itself, and it continues drawing matter and matter until what occurs is there's an infinite buildup of matter that at some point will go into an explosion. This is my theory about it. I have no guarantees this is true, but this is what intuitively feels right for me. And this is what would cause a big bang and a universe to form. Like, if you've got views on that, I would actually love to hear, because this is a conversation I've been having with myself around, what is that and how does it relate to the bigger picture of life? And when I consider that, it for me makes sense, because that's been my own inner experience. I believe in the Hermetic principles of so within, so without. And a lot of my journeys have been an inward dive, and I've gone into these dark nights where it feels like life is just pouring into me for a period and nothing is happening. And then suddenly a big bang occurs, a shift, a quantum leap, like that thing where it's like, everything's changed. And this is the big bang. This is new life. This is the birthing of something more. And it's these periods that create change. And the point I want to iterate here is that as people, we need to have the death. Because I know if I didn't have that period of lostness, of question, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have been able to lead men on this retreat, because I would have been stuck in my old identity, which wouldn't have had the capacity to hold men, because we can only hold another at the depth we've been willing to go. And so for some of these men, maybe it was their first experience of something outside of their reality, or like cracking open their own internal reality, because we did do some deep work on that weekend. And I was able to hold and facilitate because I had done that before, because I've been through that process, because I've cracked myself pretty raw at times, and sometimes it wasn't in the most efficient or effective way, but I've been able to travel inwards. And there's been many stages of these psychospiritual deaths, which I consider initiations. But the thing with this is that there is always more. And this is always going to be the case. So a lot of people think that once they get there, that's it. It ends. It doesn't. And this has been a trap for myself of like, okay, if I can just get there and do the fin and make the money and get the next client and build the business and have the relationship, get the house and all the little fins that seem so important, I thought maybe the initiations would stop and I could just pause and rest. And rest is an important part of the return, like celebration, rest, and be like, yeah, I feel really good where I am. And like a lot of people get trapped in like a 1-2 of the hero's journey where they're like, oh, I get a call to action. I go into the darkness, the underworld, face my challenges. Oh, I'm done. And then they go back into the call to action without pausing and taking the celebration and the return. And this is a period of integration, which is so important for people to have, to actually pause and be able to sit with that. Like the last 2 weeks, I've slowed a lot compared to what I've done, and it's been really good and allowed me to integrate some deeper fins, allowed me to question and allowed me to process fins that had been moving for myself, which has been really powerful. And without that, I would have just like, oh, I want to refine that. I want to do that. And it's like, cool, let it land. Let it land. That is an important piece. And so where I want to go in this is that when a person is getting that call, or they've done the call, or they're thinking that if they finish the next fin, it'll be calm, it'll be comfortable, and they'll never have another call to action. It's not how this works. There is always going to be another call, another thing to achieve, to do, to go further. And life wants life to live. So it asks us to step into these experiences, and it asks us to grow because life wants more life. It's like that desire for expansion, the desire for growth. That is what life wants. It wants more. And so this is a trick. And the fin that I want to iterate, what has changed between that version of me that was 4 or 5 years ago who went on their first experience and psychospiritual death? I still experience that. And I still go through that. Like I've talked on here about my identity shift and where I'm moving in business and like the new vision and goals and how that's moving. And even since that talk, I've had more. And what has changed is my ability to be with the death, with the dying, with the letting go, with the releasing. And this has allowed me to solidify into who I am and also who I am becoming without getting caught in as much emotional turmoil. Because what I can see at times is it's like this sucking in and this holding and then releasing and then holding and then releasing. But really what we want to do is to solidify ourselves and practice the art of surrender, of what we need to surrender to become who we need to become. And this for me is the biggest change, because if anything, the ego deaths, that they come quicker, but they come easier. My first one was intense. It was like, oh my God, the world's not as I thought. There's different models of reality. People believe this. I came from a very like engineering mindset where the world was structured and science, and that's all there was. And I hadn't paused to consider anything greater. So that first one, it was a big shock. But now as I continue to grow, that has solidified and allowed me to support myself in the transformations, in the changes, and I've learned how to hold myself on a deeper level. And so as we go through these periods, what it invites us into is to hold ourselves and to remember this is going to be a continued journey. And if you're going through it now, you'll probably experience again. So allow yourself this experience, because the more we can be in it without trying to get somewhere, I find they pass quicker. And it can be quite beautiful. For me, the resistance is what has slowed me down and paused me. And sometimes that was necessary. And sometimes I've just chosen to pause and stop. But when I've grieved deeply. And the grief has cracked my heart and showed me its raw and beaten pulse. And in that, I felt more love than I knew before. And this was beautiful. And in some of the deepest portals of grief, we can find the greatest portals of love. When our hearts are cracked raw from what is going on, we can fall more deeply in love with life, because then too we are stripped bare. And this makes all the difference. When we are willing to bare our heart, where we are willing to bare our soul and let ourselves crack before this world, to let life ooze into our beaten heart and no longer need to hold back, to trust in the process of opening and surrender, to trust in life, to know that it enters our depth and it shares with it its life, to know it's okay when our hearts are cracked raw, when it's okay when we want to die and not be here anymore, and to remember what that is an invitation for more life, because in these moments what it is saying is, no, not you wants to die, but who you are is dying, so you can become who you are. So it doesn't have to be bad. It can be a sign that something better is coming, because that's what it was for me when I was there and I didn't want to be here anymore. And now I look back, it was a threshold, the unknown, the point where I knew I had to decide that there was another way of life, that I was willing to step outside of the reality I knew, because the other option was death, and see what was possible, because more than we know is possible. And sometimes we're not sure what that is, what that looks like, how that could be. I did not know I could be here this day. I did not know I would have my own podcast. I did not know I would lead 150 men. I did not know how I could make that happen. But part of me believed. Part of me had a dream. And I believe this of all people, that if we truly allow and believe and trust and follow the thread that comes alive, because for me, that was to reach out to the person whose podcast I heard and ask them to coach me. And that changed my life. And maybe you have a feeling of something else, a feeling that you know you need to do something, move towards something, say yes to something, say no to something else. And in this, there might be a death. There might be a letting go, a releasing of something old that you know it's time to go. And it's these steps that change our world, because it's not always easy. Soul and this world asks a lot from us. It asks us to trust in the face of heartbreak. It asks that we're willing to let go of who we thought we had to be to allow who we are. It asks us to trust in the pain and the lessons that it shows us. And it asks us to have faith that there is more, and that we are being guided towards more, and that this is a benevolent universe that is in service to our soul. And the more I trust, the more it shows me. And that scares me. But it's always showed me the way, even when I didn't know the way. Because there was some part of me that knew the next step. There was a part of me that felt that calling to follow a certain thread, to do something that maybe I'd never done before, to say yes to something new, to commit to a practice, to begin to share my message, to begin to build something. And so this is my invitation to you, to not have it figured out, to not need to know it all, but to figure, what is the dream? What are you dreaming today? And then follow the thread. If it's what you know you must do, let it be done. Let yourself go into the dark if you must. Allow yourself to die to what you were. Because there is more. There is something more. And it's calling to you. So I ask that you find your weird way, that you trust in your heart, and that you're guided by your soul. Because it speaks to you even if you do not know. Because the first night I prayed to the moon and asked for help. The next day I got that help. So never give that up. Know there is hope. Know there is a way, and it's marked for you. And your soul, your knowing, is moving you towards that, regardless of what you're feeling, regardless of where you are. Trust in that. Follow the thread. This is Dean Bentley on The Weird Way, about to sign out. Let me know what landed for you from this episode of The Weird Way. We went on tangents. We went down some deep rabbit holes and into the dark today. And if you've got questions, if you need support, send me a message. Let me know what's alive in your world. If you got benefit from this podcast, please rate it, leave a review. It helps grow this, or share it to your stories, or send it to someone you feel would receive a lot from this message. It will allow this to continue to grow, for this message to spread, and for me to be able to continue to grow this into something even more beautiful and loving and enjoying the way. Enjoy your day. Dean Bentley signing out.